Hi, welcome to this episode of the 360 podcast, an all-round look at student-centered education. I'm Adrian Pumphrey, and in this episode we got to chat with Dr. Delaney Ruston, who is filmmaker of Screenagers, Growing Up in a Digital Age. Following a screening of the movie, we got to ask her about mental health issues with teenagers and also the effect of healthy versus unhealthy screen use. Enjoy the episode.
So I want to thank the National Bank of Indianapolis for providing us with this opportunity. And please join me in applause for welcoming our guest. Thank you.
Well, hi everyone, and welcome. I'm glad you could join us. We are honoured to be joined by Dr. Ruston today, and it's been a long day for you. I was in a session with middle schoolers and Dr. Ruston this morning at 8 a.m., so it has been a long day, but thank you for joining us today. It's been really great.
It's been incredible. The students, the staff, the teachers, top school, and I can see why.
So, it might be easy to watch that film and then be like, okay, I just need to go home and I need to get my devices and my kids' devices and I just sort of lock them in a cupboard. Is that what we should do?
Well, that wasn't my intention with the film. In fact, the last thing I wanted to do was a real scare tactic about it. What concerns me more are when people have the feeling that we should just throw our hands up, that there's nothing we can do. And that I hear parents who say, well, I'm addicted, so, it must be that much worse for my kids, and therefore I'm not going to do anything. And the movement with the film has really been about how do we, as communities and families, create sacred screen-free times. It's not about tons of rules and worrying about this. It's about human civility in terms of, for us now, family time, which means in the car, we don't use much screens. At our meal times, if we go out together, we try to keep the devices away, and we're pretty good at that. Sleep time, my kids have always had devices at night out of the bedroom, and it's never too late. I have older teenagers I talk with about it, and they try it, and after a week, they're like, you're right, better. And study time, and that one's trickier, but my kids would have their cell phone devices in the other room and then do tech breaks. And then more that have conversations about how do you study when there's this incredible candy of all these other things to do on the screen. Like how's that working for you, what's not working, really a conversation. But finding those times is what this movement is all about, and the how to do it is what we can talk more about, because it's easier said than done.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more, less about the minutes, perhaps, and more about being smart about how screens are used. Would you say that's true? I know that the World Health Organization came out with a report just last week talking about recommended screen times for various ages. What's your response to that?
The American Academy of Pediatrics and the WHO both recommend that for 5 and younger, that it is less than an hour a day of screen time. Above that, nobody is anymore giving recommendations. And that concerns me, because I feel like, as much as it's hard to prescribe, it's different for everyone. If we're not giving any kind of clues, it can be tricky. Just like for some people, it's helpful to kind of know 2 drinks, adults, right? Where what we think is appropriate. We do have correlational data around social emotional well-being that over 2 hours a day of entertainment, basically that's what they're doing, and I can go over that data, consumption starts to increase the chance that a young person will report on surveys that they're having increased feelings of loneliness, feelings of depression symptoms, sleep problems. So I like to think that 2 hours is kind of a maximum if I had to give, but overall, similar to these organizations, I don't spend as much time on the amount of hours.
So I noticed you said 2 hours of consumption. So what about when students or adults get online and they're playing with Photoshop or InDesign, or they're learning how to program or how to code? Would you put that in the same category of that 2 hour limit?
Absolutely not. I was sharing with the students today, and I would ask you if I could see you, but I can't, so I'm just pretending you're out there. That the data, a big survey, asked 8 to 18-year-olds what they're doing on screens. And the number one thing that they do, and I was shocked today, because the first answer was correct, and I can't tell you how many audiences I asked this question to and don't get it wrong, so don't get it right. So I hope you're all wondering, what is the number one thing they do? And it turns out that it's watching shows. So, you know, movies, TV, all of that lumped together, Netflix, that's shows. That's 40% of the time. 30% is communication, so social media, texting. 30% is video games, and also it's called interactive. It's also including scrolling on the internet. Only 3% is content creation. And when I was speaking with the students today, the message, and we got through it through different stories in different ways, but really the message was not at all one of scare tactics. It was really about, there's a world that wants you to consume their products, and man, do they make great products. Makes sense that you want to be on a lot. We do too. But also, think about producing. What is it that you give up when you're consuming so much? And I was just and you know, how great it is to create and produce, how hard it is. In fact, they really got this concept. I told them that the things that we value the most actually take work. Whether that's a friendship, it can be hard at a time, or whether it's creating a movie or whatever we try to create, it takes work. And yet, that positive impact is sustained and longer, as opposed to the easy consuming, watching a show or just playing a video game or whatnot. And I asked them, if you had a day, you know, free to yourself, how many hours a day would you be on screens? And yes, some kids said 26 hours, some said 18 hours, we got that. Several kids, particularly in 5th grade, you know, said an hour or two. One said 15 to 30 minutes. And when I asked, and then, because here was the clincher, I asked them all, why not more time? And I wanted to get to their values of what are the things they want to be producing, creating, in terms of sports, friendships, all these things. And this one student, he wrote painting, sewing, frisbee running, and ventriloquism. So I hope I didn't give away anyone's identity. I don't know, maybe many of the students here did that. But again, the idea of screen time is different, and I talked to them about what video game are you creating, as opposed to only just playing theirs. And that really, the whole goal was to empower them that there is a big difference of just consuming versus producing.
So thinking of a field where those two things might meet, a creative field that is on the screen, I'm thinking of something like computer science in education, right? And we're hearing a lot about all schools should have computer science. And is that a good trend in terms of, you know, getting kids to be more creative on a screen?
One thing that's really important is that there's a big movement for STEM. You know, we talk a lot about how the tech revolution right now really demands a computer engineering type of revolution, that we should have this in all schools. And I absolutely believe that it's great skills for students to have. What I want to make sure that students also understand is something that I was quite shocked by when I showed the film at Pixar and Facebook and Google and whatnot is, for example, at Pixar, I said to them, I said, it must be hard to get all of these coders. You know, we hear all the time about how hard that is. And Guido said to me, Delaney, it's not that hard. We have to compete with Google. They pay more. We're a little cooler. But, you know, it's okay. He said the real challenge is finding the creatives. Finding the people to tell the stories, to create the designs, And when I went into Facebook, all of this art all over, because they talked about how important it is for them to continually think out of the box, for the kind of work that we are doing in this revolution that is so novel. And I say that to kids often because the messaging, right, around engineering and tech is so strong, and yet I have learned doing both fields, in the medicine world and in the making documentaries, the art world. Frankly, they both have challenges, but absolutely creating art, creating something and putting yourself out there is incredibly challenging. And I really want to encourage them, particularly when I saw them today, middle school and high school, when I talked to them about their inner critic starting to be born and more active. How are they going to face that and overcome that and really nurture that element? So they're both important.
Well, and I appreciate that part of what it feels like you're supporting is that thoughtful risk-taking that I think a lot of us are trying to do in our classrooms. And certainly that was something that I felt like you touched on in the film, that there are kids who just sit there on their phones because it's easier than the possibility of looking their crush in the face and trying to form a sentence. And so I thought that was interesting, the idea of the risk-taking that you were just talking about, and maybe some social risk-taking as well, that could be part of what we're avoiding.
I think as parents, we do have a good gauge on this, right? If our kids are out in the world and they're at a function and they're able to talk to older adults, to kids, we know they have friends that they're interacting with, I think that's a really good gauge socially. Absolutely, at middle school in particular is when social anxiety does start. And a lot of times there's this false belief that, they'll just grow out of it. And the reality is there's really good interventions that don't take that long to help kids overcome the inadaptive, negative thoughts that they're having about their social interactions. So if a teen or preteen is really only socializing online, or really not having an active after-school life and other things, then it is time to look more deeply at what is the bigger picture. And in fact, Andrew, who you saw in the film, that was part of it. It really wasn't identified, but to me, it got cut from the film, but I thought it was, the mom was concerned. He didn't want to go to the prom. There were these things that the social life really in high school was not happening, but she just kept feeling like, he's just burning off steam.
I have heard it said that if you're okay before you start using a device, you'll be okay when you're using the device. And I don't know how true that is, but how much can devices or social media induce anxiety versus perpetuating anxiety?
No one knows the answer, and every situation is different. And absolutely, my belief is that for most individuals, kids and adults, you're going to have micro hits all the time in both directions. So you're going to see something on the screen. It might be a work email, right? And your anxiety level goes up. Or you're just feeling anxious that day, and so you just decide to just watch TV shows or Netflix shows. In terms of the side of the social cruelty, that's when you talk to teens over and over, they see a lot less of that than what we're worried about. Particularly middle school parents, we're really worried. It's a really, I write a weekly blog for about 3 years now to help parents and teens and kids have weekly 5-minute conversations. It's called Tech Talk Tuesdays. And I talk about every type of issue, talking about pornography, talking about limit setting, effective communication tools, all these kind of topics, because there are hundreds of them. And I think that I just think that, can you repeat that? I just lost my train of thought. I was thinking about Tech Talk Tuesday.
Yeah.
Then I just wrote about it, but.
I was just asking about how much devices induce versus perpetuate anxiety.
And I think that ultimately, that while there are correlations with increased screen time and anxiety and depression, for every situation, it's much different about why they're using it, and that if you talk to teens about this, the social cruelty is much less than what we are reporting, but absolutely at any time they can be triggered and have hard emotional experiences with screen time. You know, I mean, my passion with all of this has really been about solutions. I think that there's plenty of books and stuff kind of reiterating this is a big problem, or we're concerned, or what to do. And you know, I've heard everything from parents, like it's they just need to learn on their own, or since I'm addicted, as I mentioned. And I think that one of the messages I really give is that I call it the 3V approach. And it's really helped me, and it's scientifically validated. I'm always data-driven in all of this work. The 3Vs, and I want to make sure that all of you at least have this sense before you leave, is that one, the first is to validate. I know with Tessa in particular, I was so scared all the time that I was so negative. And I would, for example, I'd say Snapchat, oh my gosh, you think that disappears, but it doesn't. And you think this happens and it doesn't. And then I would say, oh honey, let's negotiate screen time. And for her, she saw me completely as the enemy, and who wants to collaborate with the enemy? And it wasn't until I started to really make sure that she knew that I understood how much she enjoyed this, how much it was important for her on a social level, that then she could collaborate more. The other one is values. Really, as a parent, to let her know what I value. It's so important to me that you have time off screens to develop creativity offline, as well as online, but offline. Communication skills with people from all backgrounds in person. And competency. You are forming you in a really critical time. And even if at times you don't want to have an after-school activity or don't do this, let's figure it out. You figure it out, but it's important for you to feel competent. And to hear her values, so that ultimately we're working together and we can create these sacred screen-free times based on this. And third, it takes a village. And frankly, it takes a vulnerable village. It takes us working together in a way that, as parents, we don't feel that comfortable. In fact, I often say I've been doing, thank you Rex for that beautiful introduction, documentaries on mental health issues. And it was hard in India or China to get families to open up, really stigmatized around mental illness issues, or my father was schizophrenia, to do that documentary and all those issues. I had no idea how hard it would be to get families to be in this film, how private parenting is, and how unfortunate that is, given that we are in a tech revolution that really is ripe for a parenting revolution. So let me give some examples then what I mean about a vulnerable village. A vulnerable village is when you call your neighbor and say, you know what if we made this carpool screen-free? Wouldn't it be neat if we heard them talking with each other again? And you're kind of worried that you're going to be seen as like the over-controlling one, and so maybe you guys figure it out, maybe it's just once a week you do that, or maybe something else. Or what I often do, if I have people coming for dinner and they're bringing teens or kids, I know that free time becomes screen time. So I, in advance, say, hey, by the way, it's going to be a screen-free dinner. And they might say, oh gosh, that Delaney makes sense, she made Screenagers, what do you expect? but actually, the teens will pull out some board game, they're laughing, they're more together, it's a great break. Again, being vulnerable. And the national program we started, awayfortheday.org, is all about schools and parents working together to figure out the best approaches to create digital citizens and mindful students and academic and emotional well-being. And particularly for middle school, and I'm so happy that you guys do this, we're really promoting away for the day policies. And we're seeing schools change across the country, not just because of us, but lots of data and schools realizing, hey, we have moved so fast before we even knew what we were doing. And we can turn around, we can step back, just like in parenting, where I have parents who say, you know what, I did not parent with integrity when I let my 16-year-old have their devices in their bedroom past 10. I've explained to them my values. We've cooperated now on the weekends, they can have it in the room. but I've changed, and I said, you know what, when you're 18 and off to college, you can sleep with screens all over you. But until then, I'm a big believer in the research around sleep.
We laugh, but I could totally imagine that. You mentioned screen-free time and board games and things, and we had one parent question about board games, but more specifically about real board games on the table versus screen board games. I think that brings up a wider question as well, which is things like, can screens replace, for example, the book? And I know we talked about that in the faculty discussion earlier with online textbooks and things like that. Is there any difference in those two sort of things?
Well, I think that the research shows that there is a little bit more comprehension when it's not on a tablet, but a tablet is incredibly efficient, and I wish so I don't think we necessarily have to do away with that. But when we give younger kids those tablets that are connected to the Wi-Fi and say, why didn't you just stay on your book? It's a heavy lift, right? And so I think there's a lot of situations where just giving, for example, the book. Now, in terms of homework, the fact that starting young, they're on the screen, it's a really hard situation for parents, and there's no easy answer other than these short conversations like I mentioned, but not the blame and shame. And that's what's often happening. And sometimes there'll be even parents who are just super like, how do I control everything? How do I monitor everything they're doing? And it's really not about that, because research is just showing that if they feel overly controlled, they will go through the back door. But when we have these conversations and have some simple rules, it can make a difference. And I think that one of the stories in the film that just gets my heart, and it's so important, is when the middle schooler showed her picture in the bra to the boy and then it went out to the school. It was really heartbreaking as I filmed that to hear her say that the hardest part was feeling like I couldn't tell my mother because I was so scared she'd take away all of my screen time and social media, as well as her judgment of me. It's one of the risks that happen when we're all about the scare, when we bring in the police officer and say, don't you sex or don't you do anything like this. The real sadness in that story is that we want our kids and our teens to be able to come to us and not feel like we're gonna make them feel worse. And it's not easy. They're not gonna come to us for everything, but having these calm conversations that I call it not a scare tactic, but a shared tactic, where you take a topic like sexting and you just talk about, okay, kind of what's happening. I heard this story, or I heard this is the law. What do you think? I know, what does this even mean? It sounds like a really intense word. What does that mean? The more that you get comfortable with these conversations, pornography, whatever it is, absolutely 100% increased chance that they will come to talk with you. And if it's really hard for you, if you're feeling like you need to over control it, like you're so scared about the what's happening online and whatnot, it's a really good time for you to consider getting a counselor, to think through, to talk through these things, or to go to the school counselor and talk about, what am I so worried about? What's really happening? How can I talk to my student about this? Because sometimes, frankly, it can get really toxic in the home or around these issues.
And I appreciate that when you show the moments between you and your daughter negotiating the contract, that it's, you sort of set out the points, but there's some collaboration and some discussion around it. How do you move from setting limits and negotiating contracts to actually getting them to control themselves? There's that section in the film that talks about self-control, and to me that gap is sort of the most important learning part. So do you have any tips for us?
I think absolutely. Part of the way that we as humans develop self-control actually is that we have clear limits and boundaries. And as you heard in the film, hundreds of studies have shown that parenting with boundaries and love and input from your kids is the most effective in the type of outcomes that we want. So particularly until like age, 13, 14, 15. When you get to older teens, and I know some of you are high schoolers here, right, who are 16, 17, 18, getting ready for going off to college, that it's really about still having some sacred screen-free time, like we're together at the dinner table, or we're in the car, we're as a family. But then the conversations are really much more out of curiosity. How's it going for you? What does work for you? I know for me this is hard. How is that for you? So you don't give up on some key, I believe, whether that still promoting some key fundamental screen-free times, but it's much more these discussions because this is what they're going to, as we do too, have to deal with. And I think one of the things I often hear people say, and I go, oh boy, is I often hear parents and adults say, well, we have to model it. If we can't do it, I just need to model it. And as a physician, I can tell you the moment someone says to me, I just need to eat better, I'm thinking, ooh, that's not a clearly defined small goal that you're going to be able to win. You're going to eat better for about 2 days and give up on that. So what's, I believe, particularly effective with our kids and teens is they're going to have a life of needing to look at their behaviors and their ways of interacting in the world and deciding what they want to slightly change. By definition, they're going to have to change things if they're going to be in relationships. Because we're all perfect on a desert island, but the moment we're with other people, there's some change that's going to happen. And as a parent, picking one thing about our screen time and then saying to them, I'm going to work on this one thing. And I'll tell you an example. For me, I like on Tuesday nights after dinner and Tech Talk Tuesday, I like to be off my screen. And I literally still forget at times. So I say to them, so I use what's called, I get their input, I become accountable by telling them, or I put a sticky up, or I say, oops, I failed, oh well, begin again. They see me in that trying to change behavior, which is, I believe, the hardest thing we do as humans. And they then learn to get some skills that it's going to help them later as they're going to be constantly pulled, as we are, to productivity versus creativity.
So I'm going to make a confession. After I picked up my 5-year-old boy today, we were in the car for a few minutes talking about how the school day was, and he says, Mom, when we get home, can I watch some TV? And I had Screenagers on the brain. And I said, what do you like about watching TV? Like, why do you want to watch TV? And he says, because I get to pick what we watch. And it made me think about that idea of you can control what you consume, you can control what you look at, what you disregard, when to turn it off, when to turn it on. And then that kind of knocked up against my brain something that one of my colleagues was talking about the other day. And he said, remember when we were kids and when the teacher would put on the movie in class, you'd be like, yes, it's movie day, right? And then we're English teachers are always worried that, oh, they're going to ask for the movie every day now. And the kids aren't that excited about watching it anymore. And I wonder if it's about they don't get to control what they watch, right? That there's this like limited area in their life that they can absolutely control without much boundaries. Maybe it's time boundaries. But that they do get to exert a lot of agency in this area. And I don't know if that's part of that addiction and maybe part of what's difficult to break for some kids, but there might be some freedom and liberation in what they experience, along with all the other negative effects.
And you're talking about your AP 11th grade class and 9th grade?
They're not excited to watch TV. They're not excited to watch the film of Much Ado About Nothing, which is hilarious.
Uh-huh.
But they were excited to put on their own scenes. And I think it's because it's screen free and it's sort of a game and it's sort of playing. And so they were jazzed about doing that. But Rex was in one today. He was great. But watching it was no thrill, and it's something that I think used to be for an older generation.
Yeah. Well, I do think that this is a challenge for all of our schools, is how do we ensure that all students in all schools, low income, high income, have lots of opportunities for creativity off of screens and on screens. Very little, I mentioned content creation, and it's impressive. But you know what's really interesting is if we've looked at all this data about how transformational has screen time been for education, I can tell you the data has shown no change, ultimately, in overall education levels in our country. Granted, we have some tools, it's organizational, and don't get me wrong, there are tools. And I have spent a lot of time asking teens and kids, what do you remember being very interesting about screen time, or something you've done on screen in the school in terms of learning or whatever? And they scratch their head, they think about it, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe they're gonna tell me some cool new tool or something. And 9 out of 10 times it's like, oh, these cool YouTube videos that the teacher showed us. Which is funny to me, because the reason I started this is I was in medical school and I was shocked that we were never seeing any short videos related to these incredibly complex and emotional stories, right? That you would think we would use to learn to kind of how to be the best care provider we can be. And so we've kind of come full circle now, 25 years later, in terms of we're still at the magic of short videos. And let's hope that as educational and as all of us, that we will have more tools that engage them for them to be creators, and also obviously time off of screens, because as I told them today, their brain potential is so incredible right now that is why we so much value. We want to make sure that they have time to do, ventriloquy.
So it's funny you should say that, because we at Park Tudor we've been talking about neuroscience and its implication in teaching and learning over the past year, especially so. And one of the things that comes out of that is multiple modalities, which is like novelty and different ways of looking at a topic, and short and sweet videos are a key part of that. They can be very enriching. But this also brings me to probably what will be our final question. I think we're running out of time a little bit. But what can we as teachers and parents, what can we learn from what kids get out of technology in terms of, sometimes it feels like we just need to sort of fight it all the time, but what can we actually learn from what kids want from technology and from what kids get from technology to use in our classrooms or to use in our relationships with our kids?
Starting from age, any kids I ask, when I say, what do you prefer, being with your friends online or being in person? They say in person. And what's easier to kind of communicate, have a hard conversation online or in person? Oh, definitely much harder in person. I mean, they get all of these things, right? What they don't get is a lot of opportunity in a curious, non-judgmental way to hear their thoughts. And they really love talking about these issues, and they have a lot to say. And my goal, and what Brent and I and everyone here today, all the teachers who I just feel so blessed and such deep thinkers to talk with, is thinking about how do we engage them, not to just be digital citizens, but actually to create the manual of what does a digital citizen really look like, and what are the innovative ways that we can become more conscious about how do we use it as a tool that serves us, and how do we kind of resist when it's not serving us so well, but frankly, boy, is it pull at us really hard. And so I think that's what being at a place like here today is really inspiring to me, because the caliber of students is so great, and they're just ready to lead on this issue when we step in to work with them in a loving way.
Well, that's super encouraging. Dr. Ruston, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. If we could thank Dr. Ruston.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Delaney Ruston, filmmaker of Screenagers, growing up in a digital age. Join us next month as we get to interview Meena Srinivasan, who is author of Teach, Breathe, Learn, Mindfulness in and Out of the Classroom. We also get to talk about her new book, Social Emotional Learning Every Day, integrating social and emotional learning with instruction in secondary classrooms. So do join us then.